Welcome to the Humble Hoof Podcast. My name is Alicia Harlov. This is a podcast for both horse owners and hoof care professionals, offering discussions into various philosophies on the health of the hoof and soundness of your horse. Please check us out on Facebook or at thehumblehoof.com. I was trying to think of the first time I heard about Paige Poss, and I can't remember. To me, she was always the dissection lady. She was always the one that had the anatomy of the equine books and the great photos and explanations of dissections. I was able to even take a webinar with her and Jenny Edwards last year with PHCP, Progressive Hoof Care Practitioners. I learned a lot and knew instantly that when I started this podcast, I wanted to do an episode with her. Tell us your name and how you're involved in hoof care.
All right, my name is Paige Poss, and I started in hoof care in 1999 because I brought home a horse that had some low-grade laminitis. And then I also had a horse that had really, really good feet. But the last farrier that I was using was, I noticed that his feet were deteriorating quickly. And this had been one of the best footed horses I'd ever had. And all of a sudden, every foot was a different angle. And he had, just problems coming up that he had never had before in his previous 11 years. So I had, as a kid, my grandfather had encouraged me to take care of my pony's feet. So I just kind of wasn't intimidated about rasping a little bit. And my plan was just to sort the feet out as best I could and find a different farrier. And then I got hooked on the whole process and, became a complete nerd. So that's how it all got started.
Awesome. And how did that evolve? What drew you from trimming to studying more anatomy and doing dissections?
Probably the way that came about is that, first off, I was a stay-at-home mom with 2 little kids and very little money. So going and studying with someone was really not in the cards. My husband was doing his residency in med school and was never home. So I didn't have a way to go study with anybody. But I have an animal science degree and had worked as a research technician for years prior to being a mom. So I really am also a hands-on learner. So for me, I needed to get my hands on it to understand it. It was early in the process of barefoot trimming. I mean, Jamie Jackson hadn't even started his organization yet. I mean, there were very few resources to learn how to trim. Everything was geared towards learning to shoe. So I saw a couple of dissections with someone, Martha Olivo, who was in that first class of Strasser here in the United States. She took apart a couple of feet, and I hosted a clinic, so I had to get the feet. So I now had a source and a place to get them. So I just kind of rolled up my sleeves and started taking feet apart to learn more. And I often would do clinics for people, because I had access to some cadaver feet. But I really found that photo documenting my dissections when I could do it by myself was how I learned the most, because I could take hours and hours and hours, but then go back and review things. Because a lot of times in the images, I would see things I had completely missed during the dissection. And it helped me put pieces together that I don't know that I would have picked up on as quickly if I hadn't taken the time to really take good images.
And is that how you started the Anatomy of the Equine website and the books?
Well, that was really funny. I have to give Sally Hug a lot of credit because I had gone out to California to teach a clinic, and Sally was so funny. I had my computer with a bunch of the images on it. She goes, "Oh my God, those are so pretty. You should make them postcards so I can frame them." You've gotten your hands on our books, you realize they really are postcards that we just bound together. So she gave me the idea. I picked like 5 of my favorite images, which is where the Pocket Guide started. But what happened is I then went to the International Hoofcare Summit. I think Daisy's the one who recommended that I go to that, Daisy Bicking. So I went, and it was really rather sad. I had just a little table I put out. I had a whole bunch of bones with me for sale. I had these postcards. And then I had my computer with a bunch of images, and I just wanted to see, were people hungry in the farrier industry for my images? Because I really didn't have anything to sell other than a few, odd pieces of bone and these cards. And I was just treated with people were so nice and so excited that I realized now I had to find a way to take these images and do something with them, because it was a really big task. I had thousands and thousands of images, but no place to really get them out the door. Well, at the same time, Jenny Edwards, who has for years had all natural horse care, she had helped me put together Iron Free Hoof. Years before, she sent me her equine laminitis book to look at. And I was like, oh my God, you have to call me. So we paired up because Jenny has been doing her horse's feet since like 2001. Jenny is a professional trimmer, but she's a graphic designer also. So she'd been trimming almost as long as I had, or about the same amount of time. And she has this IT graphic design background. So that's where Anatomy of the Equine came from. And if it wasn't for Jenny distributing the books and getting them printed and putting them together, it is such a labor of love for the two of us. Just the thousands of hours.
Right.
But it really has taken both of us to get these things put together and get them where we know how to sell them and distribute them and things like that. So that's kind of the short version of how I went from trimming, but I've continued to trim all the way through. And that has also been cool, because what I've learned with the anatomy has, every year it just seems to another piece clicks in, and I just understand more and more and more. So
yeah. And this is kind of a weird question, but do you have a favorite book of yours, or one that you feel most proud of that you and Jenny put together? Or is there one that you're, most excited about?
Yes and no. I have to say the Distal Limb Pocket Guide, the basic one, is in some ways my favorite, because it conveys so much information in such a small book. It's like having a big textbook, because it gives you so many images that you can use to communicate with people with. So say you're a professional and you want to communicate something to an owner, you can explain things by pointing to the pictures. But in the same way, owners can take this book and ask questions of their veterinarian or ask questions of their hoof care provider. So I love the communication that it gives people. But then all the books, every time we do a new one, it's my new favorite. And what Jenny and I are working on right now is this new hoof courses. And it's available. You can go to anatomyoftheequine.com, and we do have it there, but Jenny's starting to change the website now, and I think it might be hoofcourses.com is also going to be linked to that. But sometimes I'm kind of a techno-tard and can't remember. I didn't really answer your question other than all of them are my favorites.
My name is Meg Francoeur, and I'm a professional barefoot trimmer.
I've used Paige's hoof dissection booklets. I carry them in my truck so that when I'm discussing some internal portion of the hoof for my customers, I can show them photos, those nice photos in those booklets that have cross-sectional anatomy so that they can see what I'm talking about in like an actual foot. The books are great as far as little thin slices and putting the information on each part so that they can look at it and know what I'm talking about. So it's helpful to educate my customers, and it's just a great resource for anyone who's interested in hoof anatomy and what it looks like inside.
What is something that you can think of that you've learned or has become more clear with the more dissections that you've done?
One of the biggest passions that I have acquired, it was how I address the heels on my trimming. And it was funny because I had for years and years been essentially rolling the heels and softening the edge at the back of the heel. Pete refers to it as beveling or whatever, but for me, I think about it different. And what absolutely excites me, and I'm working on this module on our online course right now, is the back of the foot. Understanding the cartilage and the soft tissues at the back of the foot, and then seeing why what I was doing at the back of the foot was helping so much. It's been super cool to understand how all of those soft tissues are working. And most current imaging, short of MRIs, give us very little detail that we as owners or more lay type people, even I would put farriers and trimmers in that category, non-medical people, there's not anything that shows you these tissues very well. And you also can't take away from that, even with MRIs. You can't take away the consistency of them and the feel of them, and getting your hands on lateral cartilages and digital cushions and feeling the different textures, and then understanding that almost the back half of the foot is almost exclusively built on soft tissue. It's hard to appreciate that. You have the palmar processes of the coffin bone, but they are small because remember, they come to a small point. Everything above them is cartilage or digital cushion, and everything behind them going back towards the heel bulb is cartilage or digital cushion. So your bars, your heel quarters, your frog is all built exclusively on soft tissue.
And has that changed your trimming? You were talking about how you're approaching the heel bevel, but has that, looking at that soft tissue in the heel and in the caudal aspect of the foot changed your approach to trimming?
No, what's interesting is it didn't, because I had started doing a roll on my heels back in like 2002. And I knew it was working, but what has been interesting is now that I know so much more about the internal aspect of the foot and understand these tissues, it hasn't really changed how I trim it, but what it has done is it's changed how I can teach it, how I can show it to other people, and have them walk away with understanding how they might want to adjust things in the back of the foot. For example, 2 or 3 years ago, I was at the AFA convention in outside of Dallas, Texas, and I just took a couple of feet apart, and I had one that was kind of an underrun heel, and it was so interesting because the way I pull the soles off the feet, you have all the detail at the back of the foot, and there were a bunch of people around, and we were all having a lot of fun looking at these and comparing. I almost always do comparative anatomy. I like to look at more than one foot, and I like them to be significantly different, because you learn more if you see the differences than if you just see one at a time. So what was so funny is the next day I was walking through the lobby of the hotel, and this older gentleman that looked like he'd been a farrier for a really long time is like, "Come here, let me show you something." And he pulls out his phone and he pulls out images of this foot, and he goes, "I'll have you know, I put shoes on this horse on my way to this convention, and what you showed me on my way home, I'm going to go and take those shoes off because I did wrong." And I thought that was one of the highest compliments I've ever gotten, because I didn't tell him what to do.
Yeah.
I showed him stuff. And he was like, "I got to do it different." And that just blew me away. And this was somebody that had been doing feet far longer than I have.
That's amazing.
And
That's really cool.
It has been incredible having those types of experiences and being able to show people. And that's the other joy that I have with doing the anatomy, is I decided that I now have confidence and I can give you my opinion on what I think is going on. In the beginning, though, I just literally would crack these feet open and just show people different things. I would point out differences and variations and consistencies and, what looked more normal than not and things like that. But I think by not telling people what opinion they needed to have, not forcing my opinions on them, is what has made the way I've been accepted into the professions has just been endearing. And I think it was because all I said, I had one clinic. This is an example of how I've always approached my dissections. I go to a clinic and there's a couple of veterinarians there, and we have the feet and we're about to start taking things apart. And this one veterinarian, he kind of, in front of everybody, it was the first time I had anybody be rude about it, but he stated, he's like, I just need to understand, I'm a veterinarian. Why do you think you can teach me the anatomy?
Wow.
And it was like, but it was so funny because that didn't intimidate me at all. I was like, so here's the deal. I might not teach you anything because all I'm going to do is just crack these puppies open and show you stuff. Again, I was a little taken aback to have somebody be that aggressive.
Yeah.
But that, I think, sums up my demeanor, is I don't know that I have anything to show you. I don't know where you are. I don't know what you know. I don't know what horses you work on. I don't know the environment you're dealing with. So how can I tell you what to do with what I'm showing you?
So my name's Corey Mannion, and I own Sole Purpose Hoofcare. I'm a barefoot trimmer in Western Washington in the Seattle area. And I met Paige actually in Virginia because I moved here from Virginia. I don't know how this happened, but she posted something on Facebook that she was interested in teaching people to trim. And she got a lot of response from it, and I think it was a little overwhelming. And then she was like, wow, there's a lot of interest in this that I can't help everyone. But I happened to Facebook message her and say, hey, my name's Corey, you don't know me, but I live down south in Virginia Beach, and I would love to get in touch with you about learning to trim. I was trimming at that time and I had a couple clients, but I was really on my own, and I knew I was helping, but I needed more knowledge. So she invited my friend and apprentice and client and I up to train with her about every 6 weeks. So we would hop in the car and drive about 3 or 4 hours up to Northern Virginia, get out, trim with her for the day, and then hop in our car and drive home. Because we both had jobs, we both had animals at home to take care of, so we couldn't stay overnight. And the first time Paige and I met, I was in a very conservative mindset of shoes are terrible, farriers are bad, everyone except barefoot trimmers, they don't know anything about anatomy or about trimming barefoot horses. And Paige at the time felt very radical to me because she's very open-minded and she's very even keel. She doesn't make owners feel bad for things that they don't know. And her teaching style is very casual and very experimental, which really freaked me out at the time because I really liked having my boxes checked and black and white. This is either good or bad. So my apprentice and I drove home after our first training day with her, talking the entire way home, just debriefing, processing everything. And we just kept going back. And she was very patient with us and allowed for us to slowly come around to the idea that perhaps the way we had learned was a little bit too constrictive, a little bit too judgmental of the world, the equine industry. And I think I really credit her with my business because, or more my perspective on owners and horses and trimming and anatomy, because she's just so approachable, and she makes you feel like you're an equal partner with her and that you're doing an experiment together, and it gives you the confidence and the security to go and try stuff, which really helps. And I consider her an expert on many things, but she doesn't come across as trying to make you feel small or impress you with her knowledge. And so I call her my mentor. We talk regularly. I call her with questions, whether it's business related or actual anatomy related. I can definitely say that the way she teaches anatomy makes so much sense to me. And we hosted her for a dissection clinic in Virginia in 2017, and I just keep going back to her materials, her websites, her books. We talk on the phone, we connect. I'm going to be going to her clinic in February because the way she teaches it helps me understand. And I've tried to study anatomy with other people in books, in articles, in videos, and I often get lost. But the way she describes it is so, to me, accessible, which makes me feel confident that I can also teach owners what I'm learning, because doesn't have to be confusing or technical all the time. So anyway, that's what I really love about her, and she's just such a breath of fresh air in the industry, and she has partnered with vets and farriers and trimmers across the country and now the world, and I just feel like I've benefited so much from her.
And I know that you've obviously dissected so many feet at this point, and in so many different clinics and conferences and all over the world. Is there any specific dissection that you can think of that was really memorable, or a clinic or a conference that you felt like had a hoof that had something that maybe you hadn't seen before and in front of everyone? I don't know.
Nothing that I can think of. I mean, a lot of times I'm very surprised. The worst is when you get something super duper cool and then you only have one example. So you don't have any way to show people what normal would be. I can't off the top of my head, because to me, I guess every time it's so exciting.
Yeah.
I really am such a nerd. But it's super, like, it's never boring to me. I like seeing the healthy feet. What makes the clinics the most memorable for me is people's aha moments, what the people take away from it, not necessarily what the foot is showing me. And it doesn't mean that I'm impressed with all of it, but it's some feet that you'll see people just go, oh my goodness, I get it. I see something in that foot that I can take home.
Yeah.
And that the more memorable ones, and and that happens a lot. But that's the coolest part of it all, is when you see somebody who something clicks in their mind and they put a piece together and they know how it's going to help them with either a particular horse they're working on, or it helps them in general with how they're trimming.
What kind of tools would you say you should at least have to dissect on your own?
Well, everybody wants me to use a scalpel, and I so don't use scalpels because the handle's really thin and my hand gets really, really tired. So I use a box cutter because the blades are super cheap. I just change them all the time. And the handle's big enough. And I don't use the kind that folds up like a pocket knife. I use the one where you have to unscrew it and put the, blade back in there, because, and you can retract it in and out, so it's safe. But I do that because I have better dexterity and my hand doesn't get as tired. So that's one thing. First off, boil the hoof capsule 6 to 7 minutes, anywhere in that range. It needs to be a full rolling boil, and don't do it longer. And Brian Hampson, who got his PhD with Pollitt, he's the one who gave me those numbers because he had to learn how to peel hoof capsules off. So he took pity on me and told me how long to boil it. And then, I score the hoof capsule and make it so that I can get my pull-offs, and I pull off the sole in one go so that you get all of the detail at the back of the foot.
And do you boil it from frozen?
No. I like them to be thawed or almost 100% thawed. So you know how you keep the smell down? Well, first off, I hose everything down. And that's kind of part of the honor of doing my things so that they look good. I don't want, I want to honor the horse and not present something that's a, icky mess. So I wash them, and then I use a newborn or size 1 diaper on the stump. Mm-hmm. And then you put some duct tape on that. And what it does is it takes up any of the oozing fluids. And it's amazing how it helps with keep down the smell because it absorbs. And see, almost everybody I know puts a plastic wrap on it. Well, that's like sweating underneath plastic. It just drips down and it ends up coming down on the hair, and it's gross. You use the baby diaper and it's awesome because it keeps all the dripping fluids from coming down the leg.
Yeah. Is there something that if you could really push owners, as if you really wanted an owner to take notice of something in the foot, is there something that you could think of that from your dissections would mean pathology in the foot?
Well, as the years went on and doing lots of work with veterinarians in Virginia, especially, and working with, I had someone like Daisy has Dr. Shoemaker that she does a lot with, and I used to work a lot with Dr. Anne-Marie Hancock, who does osteopathy and a lot of body type work. And the thing that is probably the greatest impact on the horse as a whole is long toes. And it is so detrimental to the body. And what is interesting is I want owners to understand that if they don't like the way the hoof looks, they may not know how to fix it. But 90% of the time, if an owner calls me and says, I really am not happy with how the hooves look, I'm worried about my horse, I can almost bet you money that there is a problem, that the feet are too long or unbalanced or something's going on. Owners know more than they think they know. And when the feet look weird, they usually are weird. Mm-hmm. So that's probably, to me, the most impactful thing that I want owners to understand. They're not being stupid if they're concerned about their horse's feet. But on the flip side, I find that a lot of things will get a lot of media attention, and it panics owners over things that I don't see are as big a problem as they're made out to be. For instance, thrush. Horses can be sore from thrush, and thrush is a problem. But it's pretty stinking obvious, literally. And I see these owners who are like practically getting dental tools and going, oh my God, is that thrush? And it's like, no, it's the low-grade laminitis because your horse is metabolic because you're feeding them too much. The thrush is not causing your horse to be footsore. It is the food.
Yeah.
So it's hard because you want to make owners aware of more things and empower them, but it's a little bit like seeing people study medical books where all of a sudden they're worried about things that probably aren't that big a problem.
And so then, is there a point at which you're seeing pathology in the hoof that you worry about it becoming a permanent issue?
What's interesting is that you see a lot of damage. And that's where I'm glad that I've got 20 years of experience trimming. So you see a lot of things that look like the horse would never heal. And yet, I think if you restore circulation back in the foot, a proper balanced trim with or without a shoe tends to have better circulation. If you understand that the back of the hoof seems to be built to accept concussion. It's supposed to take a pounding, but it's not supposed to be squeezed all the time. It's not supposed to be under constant compression. And if you can change that seesaw and have a foot that's no longer just constantly weighting the back of the foot and having those soft tissues under pressure all the time, a lot of times it's shocking how much they can heal. So that's a hard question to answer, because a lot of times horses can do well with a lot of damage in their feet. And then there are horses that it looks like hardly anything is wrong, and yet the damage is severe.
Yeah.
So it's you saw, I haven't made it real public, but I just put my horse down a week and a half ago.
I'm so sorry.
She was only 10 years old, and I knew I couldn't manage her foot. She had a club foot, and she was fine, but I hadn't really worked her yet. And I could see that she had a little bit of issues with the foot. This was a Mustang. I'm thinking, and my vet agrees with me, that it was probably a nutritionally induced club feet, because she was brought in when she was a year old. And a lot of times the food that they're put on, especially when they're babies like that, is just too rich. And it could be that she just grew too much, too fast. So she tended to have clubby front feet. And I knew that her right front was bad, but I did not realize the extent of the damage until I was gone, and I was struggling with her metabolism, and had her on a pretty strict diet. I mean, I really felt comfortable with my diet, but she wasn't responding. And even my Cushing's mare, who has diagnosed metabolic issues, she looked great on the diet. So why is this little Mustang mare looking like a fat pig and everything on ECIR diet? So I go away and I come back, and she had crashed, and she was so sore, and nothing I did to her feet helped her at all. Nothing that I did with her diet. I mean, I even got to the point I had access to the Timothy balancer cubes. I mean, I got her diet as perfect as you could get it and got no response. And then we did venograms, and we did a lot of x-rays, and she had so much significant damage to that bad club foot. She had a lot of bone loss, a lot of remodeling, and then she had a lot of damage to the corium, and she was sinking and had sunk significantly in that foot. And it was because I know what I know, I realized that I would probably have to manage her whole life, and more than likely I couldn't keep her sound enough to ride. And, because of the anatomy knowledge and stuff, I decided to go ahead and put her down, because she was in pain. And I think she had been in pain even prior to the laminitis. She just wasn't limping. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's just, a lot of people will keep going. And if I didn't in the past, I probably would have continued on a lot more. But realizing that this was not going to ever, the amount of bone loss she had was not going to improve.
Right.
And knowing how vulnerable she was going to be. It was just a very heartbreaking decision to make, but I feel like seeing what those tissues look like and feeling them and having trimmed for so long, I just kind of knew what I was up against.
Yeah.
Going back to the anatomy piece in that, when I have a lot of coffin bones here, and a lot of times I get cadaver feet that have remodeling of the coffin bones and really bad problems in the navicular area and stuff, but especially the coffin bone stuff. When you put your hands on it and you feel how fragile that coffin bone is, and I'm convinced that most abscessing with laminated horses and with horses who have just recurring abscesses, it's from the pedal osteitis and stuff, and it thins the bone so much. I think it's bone chips that the body has decided to kick out. And just about anybody who puts their hands on there, because sometimes you can feel the lamina and it feels like it is full of sand and grit, and it's bone pieces. You can feel it. And you just realize that they're so vulnerable to this just continuing on and on and on. Well, I mean, that's, for me, sometimes it's helpful to have a real reason to make a hard decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That, you know, that I'm not just being a sissy. I know how this is going to be recurring. And the other thing, we've gotten all the blood tests, but I had everything tested with her. I got the test results back on Grace, and she was not Cushing's, and her insulin was not at a level that should have made her as bad. The fact that we couldn't get her under control, you know, just made everything seem like I needed to make a decision. Yeah. Anyway, you have a list of other questions. We can move on.
My next question is, so if money was no object, like you could spend as much as you wanted, what projects would you pursue? Would it be, you know, dissection related, or?
I would get an x-ray machine, do lots and lots of clinics for people, and do tons more dissections and just photo document from beginning to end, and just really keep honing these theories and showing people the distortions that I'm seeing in the collateral cartilages and you know, the back of the foot, and just really photo document that stuff. That's what I would concentrate on if I had funding. Anybody?
Yeah. And if you could encourage other hoof care providers with a bit of advice as sort of like the last, you know, summary of our interview, what would it be?
I think one of the things, I've always been a little bit of a, I guess because I learned by myself, I feel like I'm a little bit of a rogue in that I think that learning from one teacher is one of the most debilitating aspects of learning to trim or do shoes or whatever. Having one person you learn from and one person who decides whether you're good or not. Because there are so many people that look at things different, they approach things different. You'll pick up something. I've learned a lot from people who I know I don't want to do it like them at all, but it's really opened my eyes to see how people look at things and how they're incorporating the information and making decisions. And a lot of times it also, I think you need to step outside of your comfort zone. And once you get started, get settled, and then start going outside of your comfort zone and working with people who maybe are in a different industry or something. Going into the farrier world has shown me just how much passion there is and just how many smart people there are. And that a lot of times there are really good reasons that some of these funky looking things are used and they work. And if you understand what's going on behind it, and vice versa, I'm always a little disappointed when the people won't talk to what are we doing as barefoot trimmers. I mean, but I'm finding that the more open I'm being with looking at what other people are doing, the more people who are asking me questions too. So I feel like that's the biggest advice, is don't get into a little mindset of what's good and what's not.
Yeah, I like that.
If there's any advice to give to people who are going into this professionally, is that don't be hard on yourself. You have to learn it in pieces. And it's no different than teaching children. For example, when my son was learning to walk, I noticed his verbal skills would go away for a few days. And it was like, it was a teeter-totter. He couldn't maintain all of the skills he was acquiring. He had to sort of diminish some of them as he learned another one. And I found that's how we really all are, I think.
Yeah.
Is that as you start learning about the back of the foot, you might kind of forget or put it on the back burner and start ignoring things that were your absolute focus in the beginning. You know, with the front of the foot, or looking at the white line, or looking at thrush. Well, you're going to learn each piece. And then as you start finding the integral, the way they fit together, you can't beat yourself up if you don't understand how they all fit together. You can't.
Well, thank you so much for spending time talking to me.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah. Have a good rest of your night.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
My name is Daisy Bicking, and I am a farrier, hoof care provider. So when I first started trimming, there were a number of people in the area who were teaching, and I wouldn't even say in the area, let's say in the US, that you could learn from. Casey LaPierre was one, Martha Olivo, Jamie Jackson, and Paige Poss were really the names that came across my radar. And so way before I knew Paige, I didn't meet Paige until 2011 at the No Laminitis conference. I think that was the one in Syracuse, New York. And Paige came up to me, and I was like, wow, this is Paige Poss. And she came up to me, and I hadn't met her, you know, after all those years, I had never met her, but knew of her peripherally and had read some of her stuff. And she proceeded to open her iPad and show me these beautiful dissections. I mean, jaw-dropping dissections. And she's like, do you think there's a market for this? And I looked at her and I said, are you kidding me? This is amazing. Please share this. Please spread the word about what you're doing here, because I think this is phenomenal. And not only hoof care providers and veterinarians and also owners, everyone will benefit from this knowledge that you're sharing with us. It's really hard to get accurate information about the inside detailed workings of the distal limb. And so Paige and I, you know, began a bit of a journey there. We traveled together. Anytime someone would come to me and say, I would like you to come and do a little hoof thing at this conference or what have you, I'd say, okay, you know what? Yes, I will help you, but if you want dissection, we need to bring my friend Paige, because she is so good at it that I would not even want to try to do a dissection knowing that she can do such a better job than I can. So please, can we just bring Paige for the dissection, at least, if not for other contribution, because she's such an amazing hoof care provider as well. So I was very fortunate. I got to travel with Paige and, you know, we did a presentation at the Cornell Farrier Conference together. We did the launch of the Easy Shoe Glue-On, the Performance Compete, those shoes. I did a clinic series for them, and Paige was along with me, and we co-taught these clinics together. And she did dissections, and we related that to radiograph and talked about trim and shoe placement. It was a phenomenal experience, and I'm just so excited that she's doing what she's doing and offering the educational tools that she does. It's such a phenomenal contribution to our industry. So I'm so glad that she's in my life and helps us all the way that she does.
I always say that I'm slightly more hoof obsessed than the average person, and chances are, if you're listening to a hoof care podcast, you are too. So we should probably be friends. Feel free to find me on Facebook or email me at thehumblehoof@gmail.com.